Emma Parker sat in her quiet living room, the sound of rain softly tapping against the window. The clock on the wall ticked past 9, but the house already fell asleep. Her husband, Daniel, had gone to bed early after another long day at work. They had barely spoken during dinner, just small talk about bills, groceries, and his upcoming meeting. It wasn't that they fought. They just didn't talk like they used to. Life had settled into a quiet rhythm that felt more like survival than love. She opened her laptop, hoping to distract herself. Scrolling through old photos, she saw younger versions of herself smiling, wild, alive. Back then, she dreamed of painting, of traveling, of writing a book. Somewhere between growing up and getting married, those dreams had quietly faded. She sighed and clicked through her social media feed without much thought until one name stopped her cold: Ryan Hale. Her heart gave a small, unexpected jump. Ryan had been her closest friend in college, the kind of friend who made the world brighter. He used to tease her for overthinking, always showing up with coffee and jokes when she was stressed. They'd lost touch after graduation when life took them in different directions. And now, here he was, suddenly on her screen after all these years, before she could second-guess it. She clicked on his profile. His photos were simple landscapes, coffee shops, a golden retriever. He looked older, more grounded, but still had that same easy smile she remembered. She felt something warm stir in her chest. A feeling she hadn't felt in a long time, familiarity mixed with a little excitement. Then, out of nowhere, her screen blinked. A new message appeared. "Hey Emma, it's been forever. How have you been?" For a moment, she froze. She hadn't even liked or commented on his post. How had he noticed her? A nervous laugh escaped her lips. She stared at the message for a full minute, wondering if she should reply. It was just an old friend, she told herself. Nothing more. She typed back, "Wow, Ryan. It really has been forever. I'm doing okay. How about you?" He responded almost instantly. "Good. Can't believe it's really you. You look exactly the same." Her cheeks warmed, even though she knew he probably said that to be kind. Still, it felt nice someone noticing her again. What started as a short hello turned into a flowing conversation. They caught up on everything: old classmates, careers, families. Emma told him she worked part-time at a local art store, and he said he was now a photographer in Seattle. Hours passed like minutes. The more they talked, the more the years between them faded. Ryan still had that same charm, that same calm energy. He made her laugh so easily, something Daniel rarely did anymore. "Remember that night before finals?" Ryan wrote, "when the power went out and we sat in the dark talking about life. You said you wanted to paint sunsets in Italy someday." Emma smiled. She hadn't thought about that night in years. "I never did make it to Italy," she typed back. "Maybe not yet," he replied. "You still could." Something about that line made her heart ache. She didn't realize how much she missed being seen, not just as a wife or someone's partner, but as her. The rain outside grew heavier, the wind brushing against the windows. Time slipped by unnoticed. When she finally glanced at the clock, it was nearly 3 a.m. She should have gone to bed hours ago, but the thought of ending the conversation felt wrong. "It's so late," she wrote, half smiling at the screen. "I know," Ryan replied, "but it's nice. Talking to someone who remembers who I was." That message hit her hard. She felt the same way. They were both older now, changed by life, but in this quiet moment, felt like nothing had changed at all. She thought about Daniel asleep in the next room, steady, responsible, predictable. She loved him, but she couldn't remember the last time he'd stayed up just to talk. Their connection had turned into something polite, safe, but empty. Ryan asked her what she missed most about her old life. She hesitated, then typed, "The excitement, feeling like anything could happen." He replied, "Maybe it still can." For a long moment, she just stared at those words. They weren't flirtatious exactly, but they carried something deep beneath them: curiosity, possibility, maybe even longing. She laughed softly, trying to push the thought away. "You always did know how to say things that make people think too much," she wrote. "Only the truth," he sent back. They kept talking. About books, about regrets, about how life isn't always what you imagine at 20. Ryan told her he'd been divorced for 2 years. It was mutual, he said. We cared, but we stopped connecting. That sentence lingered in her mind. She found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. She told him how she sometimes felt invisible at home, how she missed the spark she once had. He listened not with pity, but with understanding. Every word from him felt like a warm light cutting through the fog by the time their conversation started to fade. The sky outside was turning a pale blue. Dawn had arrived quietly, and the first birds began to sing. You should get some sleep, Ryan finally wrote. You too, she answered, though she didn't want the night to end. I'm really glad we talked, Emma. Me too. She typed dot. She closed her laptop but didn't move. She sat there for a long while, staring at the reflection of the soft morning light on the floor. Something inside her felt awake alive in a way it hadn't in years. She knew it was just a conversation. Nothing wrong. No promises, no secrets. But as she walked quietly into her bedroom and looked at Daniel sleeping peacefully, she felt something shift deep inside. It wasn't that she wanted to leave her life or betray anyone. It was just that, for one night, she had remembered what it felt like to be seen. She lay down beside her husband, eyes open in the early morning light. The world outside was quiet again, but her heart wasn't. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but the memory of Ryan's voice, his laugh, its warmth, his simple words kept echoing in her mind. I'm glad we talked, was just one night. Just words on a screen. But as the morning light grew stronger, Emma knew she'd never forget it. Because sometimes, all it takes is one unexpected message to wake up everything inside you that you thought was gone. The next evening, Emma couldn't stop thinking about that late-night chat. Every time she tried to focus on something else, making dinner, folding laundry, or replying to work emails, Ryan's words came back to her like a soft echo. I'm really glad we talked. She had replayed the message too many times to count. It wasn't just the words. It was how he made her feel light, understood, seen. She hadn't realized how much she missed that until now. Daniel came home later than usual that night. He kissed her on the forehead, asked if she'd eaten, then went straight to his laptop to finish some work. That was their routine, lately quiet dinners, separate screens, the comfort of familiarity, but not much else. Emma wanted to talk to him, maybe about her day or even just something funny, but the words never came out. He looked tired, and she felt tired too, but in a different way, tired of silence that had turned into habit. After he went to bed, she made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The rain from the night before had returned, soft and steady. The house felt still. She opened her laptop almost without thinking, and there it was, Ryan's name glowing in her inbox. Her heart jumped. A new message. Couldn't sleep last night, he wrote. Kept thinking about how easy it was to talk to you again. Emma smiled before she could stop herself. She typed back quickly. Same here. It was nice. Felt like no time had passed. The typing dots appeared almost instantly. It really didn't. You still sound like you did back then. Calm but curious. You used to ask questions that made people think. She laughed softly. I still do that sometimes, she replied. Good, he wrote. That's what made you special. That line made her pause. It wasn't bold, but it carried warmth. She didn't feel uncomfortable, just caught off guard by how natural it felt to read something so kind. They started talking again, this time about the years they'd missed. Ryan told her more about his life after college, how he'd traveled for work, how his marriage had started full of love but slowly faded into distance. There was no bitterness in his words, only honesty. You wake up one day, he said, and realize you stopped trying to make each other laugh. Emma felt that line deeply. It mirrored so much of what she was afraid to admit about her own marriage. She told him about Daniel, how he was steady and caring, but often quiet. How their conversations had turned into lists of responsibilities instead of dreams. Ryan didn't judge. He just listened. That alone made her feel lighter. It's strange, she typed. How someone can be right next to you but feel miles away. I know, he replied. Sometimes it's not distance-sized silence that grows between two people. Their words began to slip into something softer, more emotional. It wasn't flirting, it was connection. Two people remembering what it felt like to be understood. They started sharing small pieces of their lives. Ryan sent her a photo of his dog Max lying on a pile of camera bags. She laughed and sent back a picture of the half-finished painting she had been working on for months but never completed. "That's beautiful," he said. "You still have that spark." "Maybe," she typed. "I just forget it's there sometimes." "Then let me remind you," he replied. The words hit her harder than she expected. Not because they were romantic, but because they were true. The hours began to melt away again. Midnight came, then 1, then 2. The world outside was asleep, but inside felt alive, like the night itself had opened its eyes. Ryan told her about his photography trips, mountains, lakes, strangers with stories. He described how he once spent a week chasing the sunrise just to get one perfect picture. It was freezing, he said, but worth it. "I like moments that make you feel something." Emma wrote back, "That's what I miss, the feeling part." "Then feel it," he said. "Even if it's small, even if it's just right now." She stared at that message for a long time. It was simple but powerful. She hadn't realized how much of her life had been spent in autopilot, doing everything right but feeling so little. Ryan made her remember the version of herself that used to dream big, laugh freely, and stay up talking until sunrise. "You know what's funny?" Ryan typed after a while. "Back in college, I always thought you'd end up somewhere far away painting in Italy or running an art gallery in New York." "Life had other plans," she replied with a small smile. "Maybe it's not too late," he said. Emma looked at his words and felt something stir inside her, again a mix of hope and confusion. It wasn't about running away. It was about realizing that maybe she'd stopped believing in herself a long time ago. The rain outside grew heavier, filling the silence between their messages. Ryan typed again. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I always thought you had the kindest heart I'd ever known." Her breath caught. No one had said something like that to her in years. Daniel loved her, but their affection had turned into routine. Hearing those words made her feel human again, alive, fragile, seen. She wanted to respond, but nothing she typed felt right. Finally, she sent, "Thank you, Ryan. That means a lot." "It's just the truth," he wrote back. "Talking to you again feels like finding something I didn't know I'd lost." For a brief second, Emma felt a tear roll down her cheek. It wasn't sadness, it was recognition. She realized how much she missed connection, not romance, but that simple closeness between two people who genuinely understand each other. As the hours slipped away, they began to talk about the future, what they wanted, what they feared. Ryan said he wanted peace more than success. Emma said she wanted meaning more than comfort. They didn't need to explain further. They both understood. When she finally looked at the clock again, it was nearly 4 in the morning. She whispered to herself, "How did it get so late?" Ryan seemed to read her mind. "We should sleep," he wrote, "but I don't really want to stop talking." "Me neither," she admitted. Then he typed something that made her heart flutter quietly. "I'm really glad you messaged back. Emma, you still make the world feel lighter." She smiled softly, typing. "You always knew how to make people feel seen. Only the ones who deserve it," he replied. She sat there, staring at the screen, the rain still whispering outside. She didn't know what this was or where it was going, but she knew it wasn't nothing. It was connection, gentle, emotional. Complicated. Before logging off, she wrote, "Good night, Ryan," he replied. "Good night, Emma. Don't forget you still have that spark." She closed her laptop and leaned back, heart full of feelings she couldn't name. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something that reminded her of love, the warmth, the pull, the ache of wanting to feel alive again. And as she turned off the light and lay beside her sleeping husband, She realized that one night's conversation had quietly changed everything inside her. Because sometimes, it's not the things people do that change your life, it's the words they say when you least expect them. The sun crept through the curtains, brushing Emma's face with a pale golden light. She blinked awake slowly, her mind still tangled in fragments of last night's conversation. Ryan's voice, his words, his calm warmth, they replayed in her thoughts like echoes that refused to fade. She turned to look at Daniel, who was already getting dressed for work. He smiled at her briefly, the same polite morning smile he gave every day. "You slept late," he said, tying his tie. She nodded, murmured something about being tired, and watched as he left the room. The door closed softly, and silence filled the space again. When she finally got up, her phone buzzed. Her heart jumped before she even looked at it. She already knew who it was. Ryan couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about our talk. Emma sat on the edge of her bed, reading the words over and over. It wasn't a flirtation. It was something quieter, deeper. Someone thinking of her. She typed back before her thoughts could stop her fingers. "Me too. It was nice. Really nice." She hesitated before pressing send, but she did. And when he replied with a simple, "I'm glad," she felt a small rush of warmth inside her chest. The rest of the morning felt strange. Everything was normal, the smell of coffee, the sound of Daniel leaving for work. The quiet hum of the fridge, but she felt like she was walking through a dream. Her mind kept wandering back to that night. It's the connection that had awakened something she didn't even know she was missing at work. She tried to stay busy stocking shelves at the art store. She smiled at customers, answered questions, helped a mother pick out paints for her daughter. But every so often, she'd check her phone. And there he was again. "You always loved colors," Ryan wrote. "Still painting sunsets?" "Sometimes," she replied. "Not as much as I used to." "You should. You were good at it." Her lips curved into a smile. That simple encouragement felt like sunlight. That night when Daniel came home, they ate dinner in front of the TV. He asked about her day. She told him it was fine. She asked about his meeting. He said it went well. That was it. No laughter, no stories. Just comfort without connection. He didn't notice the faraway look in her eyes or how often she glanced at her phone on the counter. Later, when Daniel went to bed, Emma sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea. The house was quiet again, the same soft hum as always. But inside, her heart was loud. She picked up her phone and opened the chat window. Ryan was online. "Hey," he wrote. "Hey," she replied instantly. That single word felt like a spark in the dark. They started talking again about their days, their memories. Their little moments of loneliness that no one else seemed to notice. "Sometimes," Ryan said, "I think we meet certain people again because we're meant to remember who we were." That line stayed with her. It wasn't romantic. It was reflective. But it carried truth, and that truth pulled her closer. They talked for hours again. The tone between them was still respectful, still kind, but there was a tenderness that neither could deny. Ryan made her laugh the way no one had in years. He remembered things she'd forgotten about herself, the way she used to hum while painting. Her love for late-night drives, her habit of collecting postcards from places she'd never been. At one point, she wrote, "You remember so much." He replied, "Some people are hard to forget." Her heart fluttered. She didn't know what to say back, so she said nothing. The clock moved toward midnight. She could hear Daniel snoring softly in the next room, the sound steady and familiar. But she felt miles away from that room. With Ryan, she felt present awake in a way she hadn't been in a long time. Then, after a long pause in their chat, he wrote something that made her hands freeze. "Can I see you sometime? Just coffee. No expectations." She stared at the message. Her pulse quickened. It was harmless on the surface, two old friends catching up. But deep down she knew it wasn't that simple. Her mind flooded with thoughts. What would they even talk about in person? What if someone saw them? What if Daniel found out? And yet another voice whispered quietly inside her, "What if you need this?" She didn't answer right away. She set the phone down and stared out the window at the empty street. The sky was heavy with clouds, the streetlights glowing faintly in the mist. It looked like one of those nights that could hold secrets. Her phone buzzed again. "Sorry," Ryan wrote. "That was too forward. I just meant it would be nice to see you. But I understand if you don't want to." Emma exhaled slowly. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even shocked. She was just conflicted. She picked up the phone again. "I don't know," she typed. "It's complicated. I get that," he said. "You don't owe me anything. I just like talking to you." The simplicity of that reply made her heart ache. He wasn't pushing. He wasn't trying to make her choose. He just understood. She looked at the clock. It was almost 2 a.m. How did it always get so late? Time with him moved differently. It wasn't about the hours, it was about the feeling of being truly seen when she finally said goodnight. She didn't sleep right away. She lay in bed beside Daniel, staring at the ceiling. The sound of his breathing was steady, but her own heartbeat was uneven. Was she doing something wrong? She told herself it was harmless, just a friendship, just words. But deep down, she felt the thin line she was walking on, the one between connection and temptation, comfort and danger. The next morning, she woke up feeling heavy. She avoided her phone for hours, hoping the space would clear her mind. But when she finally looked, there was another message waiting. "Hope you're having a good morning." That simple line made her smile again. She wanted to stop this, wanted to quiet the feelings growing inside her, but it felt impossible to let go of. Something that had awakened her so deeply. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Daniel talked about plans for the weekend. She nodded and smiled, but didn't really listen. Her mind was elsewhere, back in that digital world where everything felt alive that night. When Ryan didn't message first, she caught herself waiting. She opened the chat window, saw him offline, and closed it again. Her heart sank a little. Then she laughed quietly at herself, embarrassed by how much she cared. But when the message finally came, "Sorry, late night at work. Missed our talks." The ache disappeared. Emma typed back, "Me too." And that was the moment she knew it wasn't just friendship anymore. It wasn't about missing old times. It was about missing something she didn't even know she'd lost. Yet deep down, she also knew this path could only end one of two ways: with honesty, or with regret. As she closed her eyes that night, she whispered into the dark, "What am I doing?" But there was no answer. Only the soft hum of her phone on the nightstand and the quiet, undeniable truth that she was already in too deep. Because sometimes it's not love that changes you, it's the longing for something you never meant to find. Days passed, but the memory of that night refused to fade. Emma tried to focus on her normal life, cooking dinner, answering emails, smiling at Daniel across the table, but deep down something had shifted. She was still the same woman, still living in the same house, yet it all felt different now. Every time she looked at her phone, her pulse quickened, expecting to see Ryan's name. And almost always it appeared. Their chats became part of her days, like quiet notes between the noise of routine. Sometimes they talked about simple things, movies, music, work, but underneath there was a softness neither of them mentioned out loud. It wasn't a game or a secret affair. It was a space where she could breathe, laugh, and be herself again. But it also scared her. She knew she was standing on a line that could change everything. One morning, Ryan sent a message that caught her off guard. "I've been thinking. Maybe we should take a break from talking." She froze, reading it twice, her heart tightening. "Why?" she asked. "Because I don't want to make your life complicated. You have someone who loves you. I don't want to be the reason you forget that." Emma stared at the message. She wanted to argue, to tell him that he hadn't ruined anything, that their talks had actually reminded her of who she was. But she also knew he was right. "You didn't make it complicated," she typed finally. "I just wasn't expecting to feel this much." There was a long pause before his reply came. "Me neither." That night, she didn't sleep. She lay awake thinking about how something as simple as words on a screen could stir her heart this way. It wasn't just Ryan, it was everything he represented: freedom, attention, connection. Things she once had, but somehow lost along the way. The next day, Emma sat at her desk at the art store, watching the rain through the window. She thought about all the conversations, all the laughter, all the small pieces of herself she'd shared. She realized that Ryan hadn't just reminded her what love felt like. He'd reminded her that she had stopped loving her own life. That evening, when she came home, Daniel was sitting on the couch reading. She looked at him for a long time before sitting down beside him. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. He looked up, surprised. "Of course." She hesitated, searching for the right words. "I feel like we've stopped seeing each other," she said. "We're together every day, but it feels like we've become strangers." Daniel frowned slightly. "Emma, what do you mean?" "I mean, I miss us," she whispered. "I miss laughing with you, talking late, just feeling close." He put the book down and sighed. "I didn't realize you felt that way." "I guess I've been distracted. Work's been a lot lately." "I know," she said. "But I think we both stopped trying." He nodded slowly. "You're right. I've noticed it too. I just didn't know how to fix it." For the first time in a long while, they had an honest conversation. Not about chores or plans, but about feelings, the things they'd both buried for years. There were no tears, no accusations, just truth. When Daniel went to bed that night, Emma sat alone for a while, feeling lighter but also uncertain. She opened her laptop again, staring at the chat window she had left unopened all day. She thought about messaging Ryan, telling him how much his words had helped her find this courage. But she didn't. She just stared at the blank screen, then typed slowly. "Last week meant something to me. Thank you for helping me remember who I was." He replied a few minutes later. "It meant something to me, too. But maybe what we both needed wasn't each other, which is a reminder to love what we already have." Tears filled her eyes. It wasn't the ending she imagined, but it was the one that felt right. She typed back, "You're right. I'll always be grateful for that night." "Me too," he replied. "Take care of yourself, Emma." The cursor blinked for a few seconds, and then the chat went still. She didn't delete it. She didn't block him. She just closed the laptop quietly and sat there. Breathing in the silence, in the following days, something began to change between her and Daniel. They started talking again about little things, funny things, even painful things. It wasn't easy, but it was real. She told him she wanted to start painting again, and instead of dismissing it, he smiled. "I'd like to see that," he said. One Saturday, he surprised her with a small set of new brushes and a canvas. "I thought you might need a fresh start," he said. That small gesture touched her more deeply than any grand gift could have. Emma realized then that love wasn't always about excitement or endless passion. Sometimes it was about choosing to stay, to rebuild, to rediscover each other after losing your way. Still, sometimes at night when the world was quiet, she would think of Ryan, not with longing, but with gratitude. Because in one long conversation, he had held up a mirror to her life and made her see what she'd been missing, not just in her marriage, but in herself. Weeks turned into months. Emma painted again, laughed again, and learned to find beauty in the small, ordinary moments she had once overlooked. She and Daniel started taking evening walks after dinner, something they hadn't done in years. One evening, as they walked under the fading orange sky, Daniel slipped his hand into hers. She looked at him and smiled, really smiled. Later that night, when she sat by the window with her cup of tea, she opened her laptop once more. The chat with Ryan was still there. She read through the old messages, each one like a piece of a story that had changed her in quiet ways. At the bottom, she typed one last message, not to start a new conversation, but to close it with peace. "Thank you for staying up with me that night. I'll never forget it." This time, she didn't wait for a reply. She closed the screen, turned off the light, and joined Daniel in bed. As she lay beside him, she realized something important sometimes. The people who come into our lives for a short time don't stay to love us. They stay to wake us up. That night, Emma finally slept peacefully. Not because everything was perfect, but because she was no longer living half asleep. She had found her way back to herself, to her marriage, and to the quiet strength of choosing what mattered most. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. The world moved on just as it always did. But in her heart, she carried the memory of that one night that changed everything, not through love or betrayal, but through truth, because sometimes a single late-night conversation isn't about finding someone new, it's about finding yourself again.